Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Proper Variant and this is number 23 of the Victoria 3 Dev Diaries, Fronts and Generals today, and let this be, honestly, a day of remembrance. Let this be a day that you cross off in your calendar every year from now on, because this is, in all of the existence of Paradox Development Studio, of Paradox Interactive, of Paradox Entertainment, whatever, it is the very first time that we are learning about a warfare system in one of their in-house developed games that is not about micro. This is the first dev diary to ever talk about genuine mechanics that go into that direction, and I'm excited. As you can see, I was excited, of course, previously as well. Now, I do want to say, I read every single comment that was posted under last week's video. I did not respond to every single comment because, oh my god, you commented way more than I anticipated there. But I read through everything. I want to say thank you to the amazing feedback. I will say, statistically speaking, both on my channel, on Reddit, on the forums, on Discord, people generally were optimistic, but cautiously optimistic, and that is a very good sign. Please be cautious. We need to look at these mechanics. As much as I like the idea of this, as much as I have always been in favor of this now for ages, basically, we need to basically check whether they work or whether they don't work. There were three very common concerns that I've seen that were very substantiated. The first one was basically the idea, is player agency still something that is reasonably present? Because if player agency is completely gone, then hey, it will just be boring, you won't care, it won't really matter, you know, that sort of stuff. So basically, can you influence wars enough that you don't feel bad about not ordering your army around? Can you influence them enough so that you can still upset somebody in multiplayer by actually winning a war that they thought safe, right? Those are, of course, very important things, and that is the player agency. Let's remember this, let's keep it in mind as we go through this dev diary. The second case was, hey, what about tiny nations? Can they still win? There was also the other side, where it's like tiny nations should have it much easier because guerrilla warfare could be simulated in this system, and that is true, but let's keep in mind, hey, you know, there are some wars in other games that you literally could never win. This nation is not supposed to win that war, basically, but you can win it with micro. Now, is it positive that you can win unwinnable wars? Maybe, maybe not, but let's put that aside. Basically, the idea is, do small nations have abilities in which they can tackle, overcome, keep at bay larger opponents? That's a big question, makes a lot of sense. Now, the third concern was fundamentally the idea, okay, we have a new warfare system, okay, I'm excited for this warfare system, that was usually where this came from, which direction, right? But if they're implementing this warfare system for the first time in Victoria 3, could that mean that we are getting a system that later on will be way better than micro warfare, but initially in this game that I hold so dear, could be a complete flop? Right? And that is also a very valid concern, which is why it is even more important. If you have concerns, if you have positive points, please make sure to make your voice heard in a constructive, an actionable, and a positive way, in the sense that you say, I dislike this and I think this might be better, or I dislike this and I don't have an idea for a better system, but I dislike it for this, and this reason. The better you argue, the more will be listened to you. Victoria 3, I said this as well in the past, is one of those games that was insane when it comes to how accepting the devs are for player feedback, so please leave whatever feedback you may have. Now, they do remind us here basically of the pillars that were established in the last dev diary. I believe we still have them on our mind. Of course, this is a much more strategic, diplomatic, economic point of view towards war, rather than the pure micro battles. Now, before we get started, I want to point out that a few of the mechanics I will be mentioning below are currently still under implementation in the current build. While development diary screenshots should never be taken as fully representative targets of the final product, this is especially true in this case. Some images are artistic mock-ups or visual targets rather than actual in-game screenshots. Let me just remove this here. Right, so sometimes there are also some very rough in-game screenshots in there. Just be aware of this. Visually speaking, if you think about the early Victoria 3 map, now it is gorgeous. Back then it was okay, right? If you think about the CK3 characters, if you think about the CK3 lighting, if you think about the CK3 map, all of that stuff turned out really nice as it got more and more polish as we went, right? So just keep that in mind. Don't get hung up on that. The importance are the actual mechanical implementation of things. Now, wars are very important supporting system for economics, politics, and diplomacy, which ties them together. But we needed to make sure those three aspects were mature enough before we put the final touches on the military system. Basically, they created a concept for the game, said we have warfare, it comes together, it pulls all of the other things together, right? But we want to finalize, or at least close to finalize, the other concepts first and then move on. right? And then check on all the other stuff. I think that is a, reasonable approach. Of course, warfare is one of those things where you can check your economic might, your diplomatic might, and your political might, whether you may face a rebellion from the inside, for example, if things don't go so well, all that sort of stuff. And having that as something that ties it together and then comes in fairly late, we are already at Dev Diary 23, of course, very, very reasonable from my point of view. Once we're closer to a release, we'll make sure to update you on any revisions and release more finalized in-game screenshots. Big fan. Big fan. Please, that is of course one of the big things. If there are criticisms that could be worked in that work better, then please go ahead and consider that, which is why I'm saying, folks, everybody please leave constructive stuff lying around in the floor, in the comments, in the forums, just everywhere. First, I want to present the concept of fronts. In Victoria 3, rather than manually moving armies around the map, you assign troops, via generals, as we will see later, to the border provinces where two combatants clash. Basically, you have a general and you assign the general to a front, and the general has troops underneath them, spoilers, has troops underneath them, and then goes to that front with the troops and fights it out there. All combat takes place on these fronts, where Victoria's outcome consists of moving the front into your enemy's territory while preventing incursions into your own. Very sensible. Fronts are created automatically as soon as two countries begin to oppose each other in a diplomatic play, and consist of all provinces along the border of control between these two countries. Therefore, a front always has one country on either side, but it is possible for generals from several countries to be assigned to the same front. Let's take a look at a screenshot from the current build of the game. Let's recapitulate this. I start a diplomatic play. I say to Russia as Prussia, Russia, I would like to have Lithuania. Russia says, I don't think so. We're going to do a diplomatic play about this. I'm not just going to give it to you. I mobilize troops, and as soon as I start the diplomatic play, I can tell the general under whose these troops are, okay, my friend, you need to go to this front line over there. This will be your area. You will defend that, or you will attack there, or you will do whatever you will do there, right? And then if I have another general, I can assign them to the same front line. That front will be basically the entire border that I have with Russia. I have to assume that if I owned, for example, Finland, so territory that also borders Russia but isn't, the same area, I have to assume that that is another front because it's separate. But, hey, I actually don't know. It just makes a lot of sense in my mind, and that's the most sensible approach anyway. If you have Finland on your side in this diplomatic play, you might even be able to assign a general to Finland then to that front that they have with Russia as well. Now let's take a look at this front. This is the first actual front screenshot that we get. An early draft view of the Texas-Utah front. This front belongs to the Texan Revolutionary War of 1835, which is in full swing on the game's start date. Two Texan generals are assigned to this front, Samuel Houston with an advance order and William Travis with a defense order. On Mexico's side, José de Romay is advancing with 10 battalions. The 4 stars on either side indicate relative average fighting skill compared to the world's best. Here, Mexico and Texas are tied with 40 offense and 35 defense each. That's not in the image, but don't sweat it. From Mexico's perspective, this front has a slight advantage at the moment, and indeed one battle on this front has already been won by them. So, let's take a look at this screenshot and try to understand what's going on. First of all, we can see there's an active battle right here, both visually, but we can also see it in this indicator. We can also see it right here. There are 8 Mexican troops and 5 Texan troops. Right over here, we can see Mexico has on this entire front 10 troops. The Texans have 8. What we can also see is that the health, you can see it right there, maybe this is morale, maybe this is health, unclear, but basically this might be the health of the front line, is fairly low or lower in Texas compared to Mexico. You can see Texas has 2 front generals assigned right here. One has under their command 5, I believe. No, 5 and 3. I don't know why the number is different. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, they are assigned to this front, basically. What you can also see is they have 3 and a third, 3.5 stars on the Texan side, and they have 4 stars on the Mexican side. So after we looked at the battalion strength, the general commanding, the general skills, the equipment of the units, and so on, this is roughly how we are being rated compared to the highest tier of military in the world. So if the United Kingdom, if Great Britain, if Prussia, if any of those are 5 stars, then we are, compared to them, currently 3.5. This is our general strength. This is very reminiscent, in my opinion, of Stellaris. Where in Stellaris, of course, fundamentally they were basically saying, oh yeah, we have this rating right here, and this rating indicates how good you are in general, how things are going, right? Of course, there are more circumstances than Stellaris, but it's a fairly similar concept to the strength rating in Stellaris, except this one is rated against the top power. Now, what do we have right here? We have the Mexican general. He is advancing. I assume... I don't know, it's difficult to tell. Obviously, it's 10 units, I don't know about the rest yet. You have some in reserve that are or rather you have nobody in reserve. If they had some in reserve, then they wouldn't currently be in a battle, or rather not being used yet at the front, because you can see right here, only 5 are used in this battle, but there are 8 here. So yeah, in reserve must mean, for example, they are getting ready to get to the front, right? Then we have right here the Texan generals. I assume this means defending. It looks like a stone wall, and he's going back to that stone wall. This means, this looks like advancing, you know, very similar. And then right here we have 5 units under him, 3 units under him. He has a star. Maybe he is the main general of this front line. Uncertain. Right here we have an advancement counter. I have to assume that this means, and yeah, you can see right here, this means advancement, right? This is exactly what that is. If this fills, territories are lost. Territories are turned over to Mexico. If it fills for me, then territories are, you know, handed over to me, of course. I would say that this is what Mexico has already occupied. So this is the normal border that Mexico and Texas are sharing. But then this is already occupied. I gotta tell you, there is a lot of information here, and basically what it means is that at this front, there is a longer campaign that isn't just a single battle, that isn't just one stack walking around. There's a longer campaign. The troops are generally on this front, and when a battle starts, they will engage, they will not engage. There are certain chances, there are certain things that you can influence, certain things that you can't influence, because you shouldn't influence everything, right? But that is the base idea here. We can see there's currently 1 active battle, it's right there, and we can see 1 battle has already been won. 2 units of the Texan side were lost, and Mexico won and then advanced right there. Now, visually speaking, this front obviously isn't all that impressive. It doesn't look that good. But this is the early draft. You can see it right there. And now I want you to just give this a moment and envision this. Let's say where they occupied, where they advanced, maybe you see some little supply trains or maybe some little supply carriages in the early game. You know, you see somebody making sure that the front gets supplies. Maybe you see the devastation. You see ruins of earlier villages. Maybe you see something related to, you know, craters, you know, be it artillery, be it grenades. Maybe you see, you know, even deceased soldiers, something like that. Just making sure that there was disaster as this front progressed. And then at the front line itself, you know, in the early game, I would like it if we see some, maybe an officer, for example, drilling a small battalion of units. Maybe in this battle, actually, we see the units duking it out, you know, much like Total War on the tactical map. Maybe they start shooting, even if that isn't representative. I can imagine this interface to look really, really good once they actually put all the 3D in. Again, this is a very early draft. I very much hope, and I know this was also one of the bigger points, whether there will be a 3D troop representation, and I very much hope that when fronts get active, that there is actual representation. When you have a world war, when you're stuck in Belgium, in northern France, in your trenches, I really want to see that. I want to see the devastation of the land as we go back and forward, as it becomes no man's land, you know? I really want to see that. So I hope that this ultimately will make its way into this, you know. But basically what we're seeing here is the generals have units underneath them, get assigned to fronts, get certain commands, and then they head in. What these units are, we're going to see later or down below, right? What the generals are, we're going to see down below as well. I have many things to say about this, but this is the base overview of all of this. Alright, they say it here again as well. As mentioned at the top, these visuals and all other images in this diary are far from complete. We have many parameters left to expose, more UI layout to do, and more visual effects to add before release. This is why I'm not saying anything about, like, you know, obviously they're mentioning numbers, 40 offense, 35 defense, that's all fine. It's not on here. This is basically, they're saying the system is in. We want you to know what system is going on here as the implementation, but we haven't reached anything close to finalization of UI or visual representation, so let's not worry about that. Honestly, to me, it's like balancing features, you know? That is a day-to-day act. That is not an act of going, oh, but currently in this dev version it doesn't work. No, this is an act of sitting down and saying, alright, it needs to be fixed later, but hey, at the end of the day, the base mechanics are very obvious from this screenshot, so that is pretty good. The health and status of your fronts is a primary indicator of how well the war is going for you. If you have more troops on the front than your enemy does, that's pretty good. Have you advanced that far into enemy territory? Great. Are your soldiers there demoralized and dying in droves from attrition? Double plus ungood. Right, so there are many features, many factors, basically is what they're saying, that are going into whether a frontline is going poorly or well, and this is important. There should be some factors we do not have control over. This is a large thing, we shouldn't have control over everything, but we should have tangible and meaningful control. In which way we have this, we're going to see basically now. We're going to jump into this. In a large endgame conflict, you might have hundreds of thousands, possibly even millions of soldiers in active service, which is a lot to keep track of. The design philosophy here is the same as with the economic pop model. Our aim is to make the game playable and well-paced, without requiring frequent pausing on every scale, while retaining the detail and integrity of the pop simulation. When I, in the late game, look at the frontline that has 1,000 generals assigned with 1,000 units, I can get a quick understanding of whether it is progressing well or not, based on the frontline health. I'm not sure whether this number here is the frontline health, which would confuse me, because I think, based on this, that we are Texas, and it's not going that hard, let's be real here. It could also be this green bar right there, which makes sense. That is easy to read, it, you know, basically, but I don't actually, now that I think about it, I don't think that. I think this literally shows whether you have the full number of battalions active right now. We lost 2 battalions, you can see it right down there, in the struggle of the first major battle at this front. So I think this just indicates you are at 8 out of 10, basically, right? And this might be the front health, which might mean that Texas is currently turning it. I don't know. Maybe they're having a good time at this battle. I honestly, I don't know. But basically, what they're trying to do here is to have a system that influences, you know, is influenced via your economy, via your pops, via your generals, so via actual characters, you know, via who those people are, how well trained they are, what the equipment of the unit is. They want to have it that complex, but they don't want you to be overwhelmed when you are already busy managing your economy, your wartime economy no less, making it so that there are some ways in which they optimize this. Now, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching a video that I will be linking in the description that I made 2 days ago, I believe, I can't remember. That was basically the crackpot theory driven forwards, how I would like to see it implemented to give the player choice. There are some aspects there that are not in this dev diary and that I am personally missing very much. Then there are some aspects here that are in here but come from a different vector but do the same thing. We're going to get to that in a second. If you've seen the video, you will immediately see the similarities. I guarantee it for you. You can already see it basically here with a strength rating, which, you know, reminds me a lot of Stellaris. Again, this one is capped, of course, compared to the strongest nation, but at the same time, yeah, no, it does kind of remind me of this, you know, hey, I have 20 corvettes, what are they actually worth based on their tech level? At the early game, it's different than the end game. Now, where were we? Here, right. For warfare, the scale ranges from a small border skirmish between 2 minor nations in single player to a massive multiplayer world war involving every great power. Using the front system, we can account for every individual serviceman and officer in meticulous detail, while giving the player a high-level strategic interface to monitor and manipulate. Basically, you have options of interacting with it, of making meaningful changes. This is the idea here, without having to go and basically, oh, this one serviceman needs to go into this other province. That's the idea here. Much like with the economic interface of buildings or the political interface of political groups, from this front view you can drill down through your generals all the way to the individual pops that actually do the fighting if you want to. After a particularly punishing battle, the techs and barracks are desperately trying to recruit replacements to send to the front. So basically, what I said is that you will be producing, in my video, what I hypothesized was that you will be producing units via barracks, similar to how you do it in star bases. That is pretty much true. That is pretty much true. I said that you will have a template, a unit manager, that will allow you to specialize your units as you go, and then have those in a specialized way produced in barracks. Pretty much true, but there is more convenience to it, because the barrack basically are the unit template. You're going to see that in a second. What we have right here is this barrack and its workforce. Currently employed are officers and servicemen. We have some Mexican Catholic officers, we have some Dixie Protestant officers, and we have some Dixie Protestant servicemen. All in all, this barrack can fit 10,000 people. You can see right here, 9,500 servicemen and 500 officers. We, of course, lost a battle to the Mexicans, so yeah, you know, about 2 of our actual battalions are depleted, not having a very good time. You can also see their standards of living. Of course, the higher they are, the more you pay people, the more they would be in a position of hiring people. So yeah, you know, if you pay somebody very, very well, then they will go and become an officer or a serviceman as they go. You can also see some are politically active, some others aren't. Generals. So this is where we now get from the units the sort of juggle to the generals, because they are characters and they determine where units are. Generals are characters who command servicemen and officers into battles on fronts. Every country will start the game with 1 or a few generals, many of them straight out of the history books, and recruit more as needed. Generals are recruited from strategic regions. This sentence blew me away. I didn't think strategic regions would play a role here, but apparently Crackpot got it more right than I anticipated, than I understood at the time, and gain command of as many locally available troops in that region that their command limit allows. So, you can have a general that you recruit. Let's take a look at this in strategic regions. I am Prussia, I say North Germany, I'm recruiting a general there, this is his home area, this is where he's from, or where he's active, or where he's at least, stationed, where he is based. This is the core concept. Command limit is determined by their rank, which ranks from 1 star to 5 stars. If several generals are headquartered in the same strategic region, the troops are split up between them proportionally to their command limit as well. So, if I have somebody that can, let's say, can command 5 units and one that can command 10 units, and I have 3 units to hand out, 2 would be going to the one that can command 2, and 1 would be going to the one that can command 10 I mean, and then 5. When I read this, I was very confused, in the sense that this random distribution can make it difficult to specialize troops, right? If I have somebody that I want, to have a very specific setup, because I anticipate my enemy to have a very specific setup, I can't really do that if there are more people in this strategic region that this other general also is in. I thought about this, and I feel as though manual distribution is probably not a thing, because we have this manual distribution in Imperator Rome, and there I, out of all the micro games, I actually like Imperator Rome the best, but in Imperator Rome, it leads to very finicky gameplay when you know one of the generals is going to become disloyal, which will make it so that you can't remove any of their troops, and will make it so that they might start a rebellion against you, right? That concept exists in Imperator Rome. What was basically being done was people would always check in whether a general was close to being disloyal and immediately remove them, even if it makes them more disliked, etc., less loyal, but remove them if they were about to turn disloyal. If you can't remove troops, then that is not a consideration, and that is gone. Again, we are missing out on a general, for example, that is really good at warfare with artillery, getting the artillery troops. That is impossible in this system. If I have 2 generals, one is good at horses, one is good at artillery, for example, right? I can't really influence who gets the artillery and who gets the horses. So, not necessarily unhealthy, because these generals usually would have to command, a general battalion that is fairly standardized, but there is some agency that isn't available to us. There's also some min-maxing that isn't available to us, which is good, because we can't remove the generals. Why that is important, you're going to see in a second. But this is actually something where I was like, I sort of stopped for a moment, because I was like, I can see why, but I was really hoping there would be a better solution to this, right? Basically. Military operations can be complex to manage, and to model this, every general costs a certain amount of bureaucracy to maintain. Higher-ranking generals can effectively command more troops. They also cost more bureaucracy. Makes a lot of sense, frankly. Getting a general also is easier than getting rid of a general, meaning it is a commitment. It is a commitment to the capacity of bureaucracy. I'm in favor of this. This connects the capacity basically to warfare. Generals have a set of traits that determine their abilities and weakness, similar to all other characters that exist in the game. Admirals, their naval counterparts, work the same way. These traits determine everything about how the characters function and what bonuses and penalties they confer onto their troops, their front, and the battles they participate in. This is big, because this is where a lot of player agency can happen. Listen, if I understand which general I should be sending to counter which other general, if I understand something about the enemy's army, for example, if I see them in the diploplay stationing a general there at that front that, oh yeah, okay, I can counter that man. That is a lot of player agency. A lot of very good player agency. You have to, there will be positives and negatives to these traits, such certain things, but you can make important choices. I just really wish they don't explain it here, how you actually recruit a general. You do it in a strategic region, that is what they say. But I really wish that, what I talked about in that video that I mentioned earlier, the officer academy, a sort of like a general nation spirit, a national spirit that determines, okay, where do our officers lean in general. Obviously, you have outliers, you have things that don't fully fit in, but if I could force, if I could influence that, then I would be much happier about this, because this is an important factor that shouldn't be fully under my control, but that should be something that I can influence, at least as far as I'm concerned. So this is one of my concerns that I will add on here. I think there could be more player agency if we had an actual officer culture, as I talked about in the video. Seriously, watch the video if you haven't. I thought that there was a really good idea. I didn't even come up with that. That was one of my friends, actually. Right. They also, next to these, basic traits, they also have personality traits. Or rather, sorry, they have personality traits with different effects depending on what role they fill. For example, a cruel general might cause more deaths among enemy casualties, leaving fewer enemy pops to recover through battlefield medicine, or return home as dependents. They simply die. While a charismatic general might keep their troops' morale high even when supplies run short. This also, like, honestly, I'm not sure. This could also be a morale bar, because, yeah, they did lose a battle, right? That would put their morale down. Either way, again, interface not finished. Doesn't really matter. Characters can also gain skill traits, which are unique to their role. Generals may develop skills like Woodland Terrain Expert that increases their troops' efficiency when fighting in forest or jungle, or Engineer that increases their troops' defense. Freshly recruited generals start with one of these, but can gain more as they age and gain experience. Many skill traits have several tiers as well, so generals that remain active across many campaigns may deepen their abilities over time. I'm split about the system. I think the system is good. The system is better than EU4's system, than Stellaris' system. I mean, Stellaris is like pretty close to this, let's be real here. But where I'm coming from is, I like this system. I'm just concerned what the impact will be if I just recruit a bad general. What is the price for it? Obviously, these are the details and these are balancing issues, but where I'm coming from is, outside of balancing, I thought that if we had some sort of officer culture, I could myself create an expectation into what general I can recruit, making it so that I don't have a guarantee I get what I want and what my army is specialized in, but I have a chance. I can work with a chance that I can influence. I think that would be a good idea. I also talked about, this me specializing into something, that this can also be negative if you have a very old culture now of, warfare, and they want to cling to that. Horses are no longer something that you should be using in warfare, but they're like, I want to use horses. Hey, screw you, buddy, right? It can be detrimental. There could be mechanics around this that, make warfare even deeper. I understand why they're doing what they're doing here, because long term, let's say you are looking at World War I, right? And you have like 20 generals underneath you. You assign them to fronts, and obviously it becomes, also sort of like ordered there, like you have an easy overview. I can see why it would be tiresome at that point if it gets to that degree, but man, yeah, I really wish it was more than basically just let's roll for a general, let's see where it goes. Maybe there's something here that I'm not seeing, that is of course also important, but I really, really would have liked, some officer culture basically within the game. The fact that they have these traits, both the character, so the personality traits, and the skill traits, I think is really, really good. If you have a general that you think will be positive for you going forward, then you should be utilizing them in wars. If you have a general that is really good but old, you might want to let a young general do things, because that old general will die soon. And then you had all your eggs in one basket, and that is not good, right? So there's a lot of player agency in this. I just... give me more, right? Characters may also gain conditions due to events or simply the passage of time. These often affect the character's health. Interesting point. Very reminiscent of Imperator. Very reminiscent also of Stellaris, of course. Not sure how they calculate that. I think there's just like a death chance that sets in. Imperator, on the other hand, just like has a bar basically that goes down, and at some point you will be near death. These often affect the character's health, but might also influence their popularity or ability to carry out their basic duties. Shell-shocked is a classic example of a condition your general might gain. Right, makes sense. Very reasonable. This general here, Charles-Marie Napoléon de Beaufort d'Hautpoul, he is a French general, I have to assume, and he is either rank 3 or promoting him would put him to rank 3 as a general. He's a member of the Industrialists, very interesting. He has a nice portrait, yeah, nice guy. I've got some, yeah, he earned his place in the armed forces, I would guess, and he has some traits. He has a direct personality, which I assume is this. He likes the open terrain, which is this, okay. You can also see there's 1 star, meaning I assume this is like the 1-star skill version of this. He is also a good surveyor of the battlefield, you can see it right there, so he has a good tactical view of it, I would assume. And he's also become wounded, probably as a result of some recent skirmish, confirming that generals can get wounded. How often does that happen? Hey, I don't know, but that is really interesting. I like that. I really like that. That is something that shouldn't be in the player's hand, whether they get wounded, but that can change the odds like crazy, right? I would really like to see this further pushed further. Again, I would like it even more if there was some sort of officer culture, but yeah, let's just continue as we are. Like all characters, generals and admirals are also aligned with an interest group, often but not always the armed forces. Now, why are they? Generals are often given assignments far from the capital, historically speaking, with very limited communications. Generals and admirals were given access to enormous man and firepower and sent off with little possibility of oversight to see the nation's best interests. Interesting topic, by the way, right? How this was like a main factor in the Roman Republic as well, where, you know, you would give somebody Imperium, making it so that they had the power to wield an army, and they would have to come back and basically, explain what they did, that they used the powers given to them wisely, and that they are now removing them from themselves. Because, hey, you didn't know what Caesar was doing in Gaul, right? He was just reporting, but you didn't really know, you didn't really understand. And similar, of course, here, yeah, I mean, did you really fully know at all times, you know, maybe weeks later, what that general was doing? There is a tremendous amount of power in a general's hands, both in the ancient period and, you know, in the Victorian period. This autonomy not only granted them considerable geopolitical power while in the field, but also made them extremely popular figures once returning home from a successful campaign. In Victoria 3, your decisions on who to recruit, promote, and retire, which should ideally be based on meritocratic concerns, sometimes have to be tempered also by concerns for internal power balance and stability due to the impact generals can have on the country's interest groups. First off, so there are now 3 steps how this basically plays a role. The character contributes directly to their interest group's political strength. This fella right here contributes to the industrialist strength, which, as we know, determines their clout. The amount provided is dependent on their rank, so granting a promotion to a promising young general will also increase the influence their interest group wields. Makes sense. This guy is either level 3 or could be level 3, and hey, that is pretty powerful for the industrialists right there. He may favor their causes, he may say, hey, ThyssenKrupp, we should fund more, we should do that, no doubt about it. Second, if a general is becoming a little too big for their boots and you want to force them into retirement, so they're either too old or they're too cocky, maybe they're just not what you need right now, someone else can take command, so that someone else can take command of their troops, their interest group's approval will be impacted, understandably so, since you just robbed them of some political power. This basically means, if you have a general that is, you know, becoming unruly, or rather their interest group is becoming unruly, you can remove them, but that will have an impact. And it may push them further towards revolution. We're going to see that in the 3rd point here. But it also makes it so that, you know, if you don't like an interest group, you can work against them. If you ever have a general that is incredibly powerful, man, you would be harming. Like, that could be the death blow for a interest group. In general, I am very positive about this system. I think the base idea of what we're seeing here, of saying the military corresponds directly to how loyal and how powerful certain groups are to the state, is a good idea. I also, with this in mind, that I touched on this earlier, I understand why we can't manually distribute troops, because that may make it so that I can remove all the good troops from one general, right? If I can have a general without any troops, that's easy, you know, if he's revolutionary, yeah, okay, what are you gonna do, buddy? If I have someone that I give manually very bad troops, but, you know, the troops that he expects, then, like, yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do? I gave you all the terrible troops, right? So, I see why automatic distribution is the choice that they had here. And I'm more at peace with it the more I think about it, quite frankly. I really wish we could do battalion specialization and then attach that to certain commanders, even within one strategic region, but I understand why that isn't the case. It basically makes it so that you can't painfully min-max everything. Now, if an interest group becomes revolutionary, which will be subject of another dev diary, their generals and admirals will take arms up against you. If you've put all your eggs in the basket of some farmer's boy who turned out to be a strategic genius and you suffer an agrarian uprising, you may end up fighting rebellion against that same brilliant commander, using fresh recruits still wet behind the ears. Right, yeah, that is basically what we were talking about, right? If that fella goes on and says, I want to rise up, then they and their troops will be doing this. Very similar, very reminiscent, I should say, of Imperator Rome here in this instant. I like the base idea. It directly connects, you know, an interest group going against you to the actual military capacities that they have available to them. I would hope that if they have 0 military capacity, that they still get troops. I assume that basically their loyalists spawn right under the force of that general. At least that is how I view this. How I hope this goes. Interesting. Not a bad mechanic. I think the connection of characters there is a good mechanic. Again, I will reiterate, I wish we could specialize the makeup of an army outside of, you know, just in a specific region, because in a specific region, from as I understand it, they are basically distributed to these generals as the game sees fit, and I wish there was a less let's generate a character and more let's generate a character based on the choices that your military school, that your military HQ has made, right? That is something I would like to see much more. Either way, perfectly fine. I think this system, when it comes to the agency that you have, which general you choose, which interest group you choose, where you go from there, I think this system very, very, very good in comparison to the other systems that we have that do this. Imperator Rome again tried this, but because of the nature of the stack and the nature of being able to remove a general, very tedious to just stay away from civil wars. In this game, you will have to stay away from civil wars by actually appeasing people, rather than just, I take away your command, goodbye, right? Like, there's a big difference there, I think. Commanders can also be the focal point of special events caused either of their own volition or by a situation that you've put them in. Your decisions in these events may end up affecting your country in a number of ways. A question of influence, event in Ingria. I wonder what caused this event. What I wouldn't want from these events is basically, and obviously they are implying that that isn't. What I'm going to say here is just my fear, right? But they're saying that that isn't the case. It says they do it themselves, or it is caused by you, by whatever you were doing. I hope that the end of the random, you know, this wickedness must be stamped out events, I hope that that event is upon us, and that this is an event that basically is triggered because we did something, gave him more forces, gave him fewer forces, didn't cause a war up there, who knows, you know, that sort of stuff. General Matvey Krapovitsky has offered to help increase the approval of the armed forces for a small increase in their budget. Let me talk with him, I have some influence. A few friendly words here and there could make all the difference. Of course, all this traveling would cost me quite a bit. Raise the budget or don't raise the budget. I like this. I think this is good. This is an implementation of characters that directly corresponds to the main gameplay loop, which is interest groups and involves characters. Yeah, I like it. It's a good thing. I wish that, you know, maybe it also impacts like research, that sort of stuff eventually, but hey, we don't need to see like all of the events. This is a good format for events. No doubt about it in my mind. Now, let's proceed to take a look how warfare actually works. Both generals and admirals can be given orders which they are obliged to try to carry out. We will go over admiral orders next week. The orders you can give generals are quite straightforward. Stand by. The general returns home from their current front, dispersing their troops into their home region's garrison forces to slow down any enemy incursions. This means two things. It either means full demobilization or just means basically, you know, you are on literal standby, be ready, there might be warfare in these regions soon. There are some interesting things to note. This means that these troops still fight if fighting breaks out in this area, because it states slow down any enemy incursions, right? And this also is restricted to their home region's garrison. If you want them to defend an area outside of their home region, it would have to be, at least if we follow this, right, via an actual front command. So you can't garrison in this style someone in not their home region. I wonder if you recruit a general, right? Obviously you can send them to fronts, we're gonna see that here with the advanced front, but I wonder if you recruit a general and like you're at peace, can you just move them to a different strategic region as their new home region? You're recruiting them out of the home region, right? But can you move them? Who knows? Honestly, this is like all up for debate anyway. Like these sort of mechanics, these sort of fine-tuning issues. I just, you know, shoots into your mind, doesn't it? Advanced front. The general gathers the troops, moves to the target front, and tries to advance it by launching attacks at the enemy. Right, so classic aggressive command, basically. Defend front, like advanced front, except the general never advances, instead focusing only on intercepting and repelling enemy forces. We saw this earlier. Very interesting. In the war Mexico against Texas, we have one commander that is defending this, we have one commander that is advancing. I would assume that if the enemy has a commander that says, I want to advance, the defending commander will make sure that there will be troops available to try and participate in these active skirmish battles, right? Whereas the other one may currently be planning their own attack, right? Meaning that they have troops that they are not committing to the battle and instead are moving forward. This is interesting. This is, on a strategic level, operational choices. I know it sounds stupid because it's two different levels. Moving a doom stack basically is operational. Moving, you know, saying, okay, I need you to defend, I need you to attack right there, to plan an attack, you know. That sort of stuff is very much strategic because it gives a wide overview. But the options that we have here and how it can be understood and how it may impact, you know, how warfare goes, that is actually quite an interesting input that you have on the front. There is definitely player agency in there right there. You know, whether you have 2 generals advancing, 1 general defending, 2 generals defending, right? Very interesting topic. These orders may end up executed in different ways depending on the general's traits. I love that so much, resulting in different troop compositions and battle conditions during the operations. Oh my god, I love that so much. It just give me like a tiny bit of influence, you know, on like what the traits are. If my school focuses on fighting in the open, fighting in the mountains, because I anticipate to fight in these areas, or I have fought in these areas in the past, please let me influence that. I would love you to hell and back. Seriously, it would be so good. Right now, hey, if I find a commander that fits me and I make smart choices, this is a huge part of player agency here as well. Do you recognize which general would be good at which front? Do you or do you not? Right? But if I could influence that, and if there were downsides, man, sorry, I really would love to see that idea, and sadly we don't, which is why I'm like, I love this dev diary, I love these mechanics, but like, man, I would love that even more. For example, a reckless general may provide his battalions with increased offense during advances, but few of his casualties taken will recover after the battle. Are you able to afford that on the long term, right? Those are the questions that you need to ask yourself. Further, his recklessness may lead to making a risky maneuver during a battle which could prove a brilliant or a catastrophic move. Basically, similar, I guess, to CK3's aggressive leader, right? Where or reckless leader, I think it's literally reckless leader, where the lowest result that you can get is lower, and the highest result that you can get is also higher. Really good. I like this idea a lot. Not everything is in your control when it comes to the actual scenery, the actual front, the actual fighting, but who you sent there, what they might do, that is completely in your understanding. I really, really like that. Now, generals charged with advancing a front will favor marching towards and conquering states marked as war goals, but their route there may be more or less circuitous, so basically whether they take the direct way or not, depending on how the war is progressing and possibly other factors, such as the local terrain. Let's put this into action, okay? Let's say I fight the war against Texas. I am Mexico now, right? And my command was that I want to get to this river, right? Let's just say that. Like, this is the... Obviously, they're talking about target states, but later down the line, they're talking about more specific commands as well. Let's say I want to take this road to cut them off, right? Let's just suggest that. Let's say we lose this battle as Mexico. The front wouldn't advance. Maybe it would even go further back, right? But if I fight a battle here, if there was another battle picked right there, I may be able to advance this road and cut it off, right? In this location. I would really like that, if that is basically how it is. Yeah, this was the original plan, but then we adjusted, right? This could create different wars every time you go to war. That's just as simple as it is. I would love it. So basically, yeah, the potential best path there can change depending on how the war is progressing and possibly other factors such as the local terrain. Other such designated priority targets, so more specific targets, which the player could set themselves to alter the flow of a battle, is a feature we're looking for, and we're looking into adding to represent strategies and events such as General Sherman's March to the Sea. This is not currently in the game, but is something we think would add an interesting dimension to the strategic gameplay, so something like this is likely to make its way in sooner or later. Fingers crossed. That is good. Yes! General advance, general defense. That is basically what you need to then tackle the things that are going on. But the idea of saying, okay, I need you to go, you know, to basically go down, what was it, the Mississippi River that General Sherman went down? Or to say, for example, you know, in Manchuria, I need you to secure the river right there, you know. Specific goals such as that one would be amazing because they would further complexify how a general's troop setup and how a general's skills affect the actual tide of battle. Huge fan of this. Huge fan of this approach. Please, 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 please bring this stuff in. This is an easy to make decision with many implications, making it actually hard to make. But it's much, much better than microing, right? There's so much other stuff going on. This is basically the same idea, but you are in control of the complete unit setup, you're in control of which general is there, and so on and so forth, and then you decide, okay, here's a general, you know, go towards the coast, go towards this river, go towards this mountain range, all that sort of stuff. I need that stuff. Fronts targeted to advance or defend can also be a front belonging to a co-belligerent, as long as you can reach it by land or sea. For example, if Prussia supports Finland in a war of independence against Russia, they could send 1 or 2 generals to advance their own front against Russia and another to help defend the Finnish-Russian front, ensuring Finland can stay in the war for as long as possible, while simultaneously striking at Russia's own war support. To do so, it needs to send its troops helping Finland across the Baltic, which require naval support we will learn more about next week. Basically, there will only ever be one front, and that front is between country that is here, country that is there. But if you are on the side of either of these countries, you can set your general to this front. They must be supplied, and their units will go with them. If we look at this map again, you will also notice, indeed, that if I recruit a general here and send them to there, that's a different strategic region, meaning they do not appear to be bound at all by the strategic region in terms of deployment, right? I can deploy my general that has their headquarters here, over there, at a friendly country. Doesn't need to be my front line, but I belong to this front now. I like this simple system, works. That's where I'm coming from on this topic. I think this is basically what was anticipated, right? And I do think it makes a lot of sense. Now, how the naval support works, how moving a general and their troops works into this location, I am super, super, super eager to find out. Because if the navy is supposed to matter, that is a big topic, right? That is a big, big topic. Even if I have a general in Finland, if Russia gets rid of all supply that I have, we might be screwed. And I think that is really, really cool. That can decide a war. That can decide a war. If you have a navy that can cut off the enemy like that, it would be really, really cool if it's done in a meaningful way, and in, of course, a way that leaves us with meaningful interaction. Now, here we come to mobilization. Generals cannot be given orders unless they are mobilizing. In peacetime, all generals will be demobilized, doing whatever it is 19th century generals do in peacetime, while their troops are on standby, doing occasional drills to keep readiness up. Basically, they will still be consuming ammunition, artillery, tanks, rifles, that sort of stuff, right? As soon as a diplomatic play starts, and for as long as the country is at war after that, players have the option to mobilize any and all of their generals, which will increase the consumption of military buildings, guns, ammo, artillery, etc., and start the process of getting that general's troops ready for frontline action. The speed by which troops are readied is dependent on the infrastructure in their local state, so high infrastructure states can mobilize many more troops quickly, while low infrastructure rural states might take much longer to gather and organize a lot of manpower. This is really cool. They talked about this, preparation is key. You can start doing this in the diplomatic play, and this can decide the war, or at least the early weeks, the early months of the war. If you have an easier time mobilizing, if you mobilize earlier, you're in a position where victory is already in your hands just after a couple of weeks, if the enemy doesn't see it coming. This, and people should keep this in mind in my opinion, yes. Let's go into the multiplayer example, right? In multiplayer, until now, whether you would win or lose, obviously there's a certain makeup of your troops, and that is what you follow, but then primarily it depends on whether you can rotate your troops in and out of a battle, you know, whether you are wise in choosing your battles, whether you basically sort of play StarCraft faster than your enemy, and that is a skill challenge, it has to be said. But I personally, when I played multiplayer in Victoria 2, when I played multiplayer in any game, CK3, oh my god, it's so good in that game, I like the head factor. I like the bickering. I like the threatening. I like the behind their back betraying. If I go and I mobilize, that is a threat. That is me saying I'm willing to go all in. Screw you, buddy. This entire topic is a huge, huge degree of strategy that did not exist in previous games. Victoria 2 had crises, yes, that is entirely true. But this is every single war. And if you underestimate your opponent, if you believe their lies, if you think you can handle them with just one army mobilized and not all of your armies, you may be in for a rude awakening. Deception, threatening, bickering, that is all in there. I love this. This is a huge, or it's going to be, I can already see this, it's going to be a huge part of multiplayer in Victoria 3. A huge part. Let's continue here. Right. This means when you choose this means when you choose to start mobilizing, and how many generals and battalions you choose to mobilize will matter a lot to your initial success in the war. And as everyone knows, the first few battles could well prove decisive if the other party is taken by surprise. Think about France in the Franco-Prussian War. They had time, but they had a very bad logistics system. They got caught off guard by the movements of the Prussian army that was already in full, basically, or rather had a much better degree of logistics planning, and then they got caught in Sedan. I don't even know how you pronounce it, and yeah, basically the war was over, right? It's a huge logistical victory that the Prussians scored there, and that is by far not the only one. They scored the same result, of course, against Denmark. They scored it against Austria. The campaign against Austria and the battle by Austerlitz is such an interesting campaign to analyze and to talk about in this context. So yeah, I really love that this has become a major focus. This alone, yes, Victoria 1 and Victoria 2, they both had mobilization, but this approach to mobilization and having it streamlined in a way in which I don't need to worry about every single unit. Instead, I assign the generals that these units belong to anyway. This understands warfare in this period much better than the system before it. Again, I have nothing negative to say actually about mobilization. I think I was on a split mind, of two minds basically when it comes to generals and how they're recruited. But this is the pinnacle of how this is supposed to be. This is what is so important both in multiplayer but also in single player. Maybe I am misjudging what the AI believes to be the right choice, right? And in multiplayer, there is such a huge potential here for basically completely misjudging it. A larger nation saying, oh, I can handle it. This one general of mine can handle it. And then they get completely trounced. And the other nation all of a sudden is able to sue for peace at much better terms. I am so looking forward to actually playing with the system. It is so much better. Mobilized generals cannot be demobilized. Wait, actually, I think... Right, no, we need to read this, I think. Choosing to mobilize big and early in a diplomatic play tells the other participants two things. One, you are serious, and two, you're hedging your bets that this won't end peacefully. This in turn can trigger a cascade of mobilizations, and before you know it, a peaceful solution is no longer on the table. Choosing to hold off on mobilization until late means you save precious money and lives until it is needed, but it may cost you the war if that's what it comes down to. This is a component that makes the warfare experience so much better connected to the rest of the game, diplomacy and economy, and also is such a thrilling aspect of it. I am so eager. I talked about this earlier in one of my last videos. I said, if you understand the games to a good degree, you will never declare war that you could lose. And there were some responses. I want to address that as well. There were some responses that basically said, well, yeah, but would you really declare war that you can't, that you think you don't, or would you really declare war that you think you wouldn't win? The answer to that is, of course, yes. But in the microsystem, if you understand it, there is no uncertainty. This entire thing is the first time that war will fundamentally be uncertainty. Because you don't know whether people will back down, you don't know whether people will, whether it will escalate to an insane degree, whether other nations will suddenly be against you because you mobilized. This is insanely big. This is insanely big. For the very first time, warfare and the preparation of warfare will always be an uncertainty. Always be an uncertainty. That's insane. That is a huge step up. Yes, sure, I have my reservations about other stuff, but this impact of bringing the right general to the right front at the right time is insane. That is a massive step. Really enjoyed. Mobilized generals cannot be demobilized until the war is over. Once you've committed your troops to the war, they expect to be in the field and well supplied until a peace is signed. If getting what you want out of your war out of a war takes a long time, your expenses may eventually begin to exceed the value of the potential prize. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how you, as a small nation, can make a large nation not want to fight you. Hey, if I attack someone in India, I'm the Sikh Empire, and I attack the East Indian Company, and they get, support from Great Britain, Great Britain may not want to pay for those supplies all the way around Africa to India. And if that's the case, they may want to dip. So this is one of the ways that most certainly look to me like that is possible. In progress, artistic mock-up of an army interview listing all your generals with shortcut actions. In this case, only General Longname has been mobilized. Activated. Preparing his men to go to the front at the expense of increased goods consumption and attrition. Right, let's take a look at this. So, We have an army, we have garrisons, and we have a navy. You can see right here, and this is a mock-up. I want to make that clear as well. You can see it right here. Personality trait, some other skill trait. This is a mock-up, okay? This guy's name is person with a very long name, and this is John Doe. So yeah, okay, let's treat it as a mock-up. These are conscripts, meaning these are the troops that only get mobilized if you really, really need to. This is your normal army. Fielded 50 and in garrison 50. So in garrisons over there. Mobilize all generals, activate conscripts, okay, easy steps right there, yeah, you mobilize them, then you assign the generals to the front and the game does the rest. You can in the meantime take care of the economy during this large war. John Doe, right here, has 4 traits, most of which we can't explore. He is idling in the South Russia HQ. You can activate him. He currently is not activated, so he's demobilized, he's just hanging out, he's having a good time in his regional zone. Can we see this? South Russia, so he's somewhere here, maybe sitting on Crimea, right? Who knows? Then right here, we have a person with a very long name, also conditions and personality traits, and he will be defending South Russia HQ, or rather, he will be defending in South Russia HQ. I'm not sure. This is a mock-up, of course, but I'm assuming this is basically the default status when you mobilize. Once you assign him to a front, it might read defending the front against, or rather in... Oh, actually, no. Hey, we can actually see that. Right. This is the Great Plains HQ. So that's what it will read. Basically, defending in the South Russia HQ means he is defending, for example, you know, it could be defending the sea area, right? This could be possible. He could be defending. There are no other countries here. Who knows? Maybe we just, you know, who knows? But this also actually brings me to a different point that I wanted to bring up. People were wondering, how could naval invasions work? And they could work easily. If I assign you to defend South Russia HQ, the enemy could set someone to conquer South Russia HQ, conquer this state. And then they do a naval invasion if they have the naval support, and then they start fighting right here. Much like they would be fighting if we had a land border like over here, right? It's the same principle, should work the same way. I don't see why, you know, it wouldn't, basically. Yeah, okay, so fair enough. I assume this means that currently 0 out of 50, so he might have 50 units and then not currently mobilized. You can see that he has some navy support, or that he needs navy support, I'm not sure. Then you can see what the attrition level is right here. Okay, fair enough. And yeah, he's currently mobilizing, you can see it right there. Fair enough, indeed. I assume that they both have 50, and this means currently 0 to 50 mobilized, but it will be happening. Now let's continue. Your land army is composed of battalions, which are groups of 1,000 workforce with servicemen or officer professions. We can see that... Okay, it's not actually one of those. You can see that right here. So it's 1,000 manpower that you need for one battalion. You can see this barrack, if it was full, would have 10 battalions, right? That's basically the way it works. They each would have 50 officers and then 950 servicemen. Right, that is basically how that works. There are 2 buildings where these units come from. Barracks or conscription centers. The difference between these are that barracks are constructed manually and house the country's standing army, which are considered permanent troops, while conscription centers are activated as needed during a diplomatic play or war and recruit civilians into temporary military service. So basically, once you enact the actual active war draft, these pop up all over the country and say, you need to join us, you need to join us. And then depending on whether it is a rural state or a very developed state, it will take these new centers some time to get those people up. Right, the barracks are constructed manually, and that is the standing army, then the other one is the true mobilization army. In addition, barracks have a wider selection of production methods to choose from, particularly high-tech late-game production methods. How your army is divided between professional and conscripted soldiers depends on your army model law, which we will cover in more detail in a few weeks. Makes a lot of sense to me. So, let's talk about the production methods. I talked about, in my video, I talked about templates for armies, similar to fleets in Stellaris, you know, the way that both the fleet templates work and the way that the troop templates work. We do not have an army template because armies get their troops assigned based on the skill of their commander and what troops are available in that area. But with the production methods, we effectively have a unit designer. We're going to see that here in a second. Different production methods have different effects. They employ pops of certain professions and consume goods to provide a set of effects. In this case, they employ servicemen and officers in proportions depending on your organization style, consume a number of military goods, and in return provide battalions with different combat statistics, such as offense, indicating how useful they are during an advance, and defense, indicating how useful they are when defending against an advance. Since military buildings work according to the same logic as other buildings, such as factories and plantations, all core mechanics, such as market access, good shortages, qualifications, etc. apply to them in exactly the same way. Meaning, if I have a barrack somewhere, that barrack needs to be supplied with the units that, or with the things that it needs, including the manpower, to then actually send that to the front. That is how I read this, right? And that is really good. I like this. If one of your barracks battalions are supported by armored divisions, but you cannot supply it with enough tanks, recruitment will slow down to painful levels, and both offense and defense will suffer, which is when you will probably want to change the unit template of this barrack, which is the production method. If you don't have enough qualifying officers, the number of battalions the building can actually create will be throttled. Just because you have researched a new type of artillery piece or a more efficient way to organize your army does not mean you'll be ready to modernize straight away. And if your local infrastructure suffers, the acquisition cost for the requisite costs could reach astronomical levels. This is basically what I was hoping for. I was hoping for a genuine unit designer, right? But this is literally a unit designer in a building. This is the barracks function as a unit designer, basically. I'm completely fine with this. I think this is a really good implementation. I can dial it back. If I don't have artillery for all of my troops, I don't have artillery for all of my troops. If I have a barrack, in which I specialize the troops to have this or have that, then they have this or have that, and the others don't, and then I can say, okay, I need this for these units because they will have to fight in a certain enemy, for example. I think that is perfectly reasonable. Upgrades to production methods in military buildings take considerable time to take effect. While any goods consumption changes happen immediately, improvements to combat effectiveness take some time to realize. Keeping military spending low during peacetime by reverting your military to pre-Napoleonic warfare doctrines might be pleasant for your treasury, but less great for both your war readiness and prestige, the latter which is directly impacted both by how large and how advanced your army is. Love it. I love that. Yet another case for preparation right here. Yet another case of the cost of war already playing a role when you are at peace. Let's take a look at this. In progress, artistic mock-up of a battalion garrison focused list. Illustrations are selected for a collection of similar battalions based on dominant battalion culture defined by the POPs in the military building and tech level defined by the production methods used in the military building. Collections can be expanded to display the full list. From there, the player can click through from a given battalion to the military building supporting it. Right, so if I see an army and I say, oh, this unit should be better, I can go to their barracks and immediately alter it. I wish we could choose which troops go to which general so that I can then say this general, for example, yeah, he's headquartered in Berlin, but I'm going to send him, to deal with some of my colonies or a colonial war against Great Britain. I would like that, but I think these units, since they are just assigned, proportionally distributed in the HQ, so in the strategic region, I don't think that's the case, but let's brush that aside. I think that is a detail complaint that I have there. Felix Aguirre is in Iberia. He has this image right there. This one is not colored. I assume it is because they're currently not mobilized. I don't think you're mobilized either, but honestly, I'm not sure. They have the same icons at the very least. So, hey, this is just a mock-up, right? Yeah, this is just a mock-up. So, in the future, you would have different symbols here, whether you have artillery, whether you have new artillery, whether you have, these big guns, for example. I get it. Let's not get hung up on the actual symbols. I don't think that matters. Based on who is in your army or who is in your battalions, and based on who is in a position of giving equipment out, you will have different symbols. This is good. This is a unit template. This is a unit template, much like I was hoping for. Based on Solaris. It works perfectly fine. It works like a building so that you have a point of contact that you can interact with and where you can easily change certain things. I like it a lot. You can also see here, I assume this would be its, for example, its advanced value, right? This is its defense value, and then this is how many people are currently actually present in a battalion. This is likely a unit that now is mobilized. This is a unit that is still mobilizing. Great stuff. Listen, it's all great stuff. When it comes to the battalions. All this leads us to battles. Advancing generals will eventually gather enough troops to launch an attack into one of the enemy-controlled provinces along the front, which will be intercepted by defending troops and possibly an enemy general. In short, a battle then takes place over some number of days until one force has taken enough casualties and morale damage to retreat. We will go over in more detail how battles play out in a future dev diary, but suffice to say, for now, that a bunch of battalions going along with a number of different combat-related stats and conditions, some of them related to the generals and their troops, others due to their conditions like province, terrain, and chance. If the advancing side wins, they capture a number of provinces depending on how large their win was, what sort of technology they use, how dispersed or concentrated the enemy forces are across the region, and so on. Yeah, I like that. This sounds insanely reasonable. I'm sorry to say. If I'm fighting an enemy and I beat them decisively, I can then march on into their territory. Listen, we had one battle here, right? We had a single battle here. Look at that. pretty significant, isn't it? Of course, if you had a trench warfare here, winning a battle means nothing. And that is how you experience this change in warfare. I am a fan. I most certainly am a fan of this. Where were we? If the defending side wins, they repel the advances and will likely be able to launch their counterattack at a nice advantage, as the other troops that likely were in that battle will probably have to sort of, re-establish themselves, reform themselves. A single front can cover a large stretch of land, and just because a general with 100 battalions is on a front does not mean they travel with 100,000 individuals in their encampment like you would with marching, with the actual microing. Those battalions are considered to be spread out, simultaneously planning their next advance while intercepting enemy advances, but as such, the force size each side in the battle can bring to bear may vary. Furthermore, battalions under the command of other friendly generals on the same front may be temporarily borrowed for a certain battle, and even battalions without mobilized generals, considered part of the region's garrison, we had that earlier, can be used to defend against incursions. However, battalions not under the direct command of the general in charge of the battle do not gain the benefits of his traits, because, he's not training them. Yeah, this is great. I gotta be real with you. This is just a really good system. The cost of war can be altered. You can have a really costly war. You can have a really cheap war based on your preparation, of the enemy's preparation, on where you're fighting, what sort of generals you send, what your equipment on your units is. Agency. I personally think this is a lot of agency. Again, my only big issue is basically with how generals are generated, but let's put that aside. As much as I keep bringing it up because it's just like it keeps irking me, but this fundamentally simulates warfare at the start of the game and at the end of the game. You take more land at the start of the game after one successful battle because that is how it was. You will take less land because the density of troops, the impact of battles will be significantly less, making it into a meat grinder. Huge fan. The variable size of battles, particularly when combined with mobilization costs, counteracts the otherwise dominant strategy of doom stacking and make wars feel more like a tug of war than a race. Each side can choose to either try to gain a marginal advantage over the other on the cheap or spare no expense to increase their chances for an expedient victory, with any position on this spectrum being a valid option in different situations. We'll get deeper into some of the combat statistics that go into resolving a battle in a few weeks when we explore military buildings in more detail, and we will talk more about how battles play out and look on the map in a dev diary a little further down the line. We're anxious to show them to you, but we need to give those visuals a little more attention first. Listen, I believe them. Their map now looks great. I'm not concerned about this. I know people were rightfully concerned. Can you see your troops on the map? Do you have the visual candy, the eye candy, right? I believe them. Have you seen the map right now? The map looks insanely good. And the warfare system itself is the best warfare system that we've ever seen in this game. I am stoked. I am stoked. I will never not complain about certain elements, such as the general generation and such, right? But I'm happy with this. There are open questions here for me. There are questions such as, how does naval supply work? We will learn about this in the next dev diary, so very important. There are questions such as, can I send my officers to other countries to educate them? Can I send my weapons to them so that they can use better weapons in these new circumstances? These are questions that I have. I don't know whether they are possible in the system, but the fundamental core of this system is truly exciting. Truly exciting. Balancing is one thing, but the way you interact with warfare is much more integrated than in any other game. That's land warfare in a nutshell. In the two upcoming dev diaries, we will go over the major role that navies play in the system, as well as the economic and human costs of war, which are closely interrelated. For now, I want to close by saying that we appreciate your patience in waiting for details on warfare mechanics. The reasons for why we've chosen to diverge so far from the classic GSG military formula was because it's bad, would be hard to grasp until you've seen how the different economic, political, and diplomatic systems function. Too long didn't watch. The heat map theory, the theory of crouching Lemo as well, they were pretty spot on. The unit template system is not in a unit template generator, but in the barracks, but it's in. This warfare system is the best integrated warfare system we've ever had. I love y'all. I'll see you later. Leave a comment. Later, alligator.